Hey everyone, it's the Rev'd Gendi Burwell. This Sunday we had a parable from Matthew. So I'm going to read it in the Message translation because the Message is pretty cool. At church we will have read it in the NRSV version. So it's Matthew 13, 24 to 30 and then 36 to 43. Jesus told another story. God's kingdom is like a farmer who planted good seed in his field. That night, while his hired men were asleep, his enemy sowed thistles all through the wheat and slipped away before dawn. When the first green shoots appeared and the grain began to form, the thistles showed up too. The farm hands came to the farmer and said, "Master, was that clean seed that you planted? Well, where did all these thistles come from?" He answered, "Some enemy did this." The farm hands asked, "Should we weed out the thistles?" The farmer said, "No, if you weed the thistles, you'll pull up the wheat too. Let them grow together until harvest time. Then I'll instruct the harvesters to pull up the thistles and tie them into bundles for the fire. Then we'll gather the wheat and put it into the barn." Jesus dismissed the congregation and went into the house. His disciples came in and said, "Explain the story of the thistles in the field." So he explained, "The farmer who sows the pure seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The pure seeds are subjects of the kingdom, and the thistles are subjects of the devil, and the enemy who sows them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, the curtain of history. The harvest hands are angels." The picture of thistles pulled up and burned is a scene from the final act. The Son of Man will send his angels, weed out the thistles from his kingdom, pitch them into the trash, and be done with them. They are going to complain to high heaven, but nobody is going to listen. At the same time, ripe, holy lives will mature and adorn the kingdom of their Father. Are you listening to this? Really listening? This is the gospel of Christ. Praise to Christ, the Word. Something I want to say before we look specifically at this passage. The Gospel of Matthew was probably written by a Jewish Christian in about 85 or 90 AD. So that is 60 years, roughly, after Jesus' death. Okay, so just hold that in mind. 60 years after he died, these stories have been written down and we now read them and interpret them and apply them into our 21st century, which is a long time later. One thing we do know, or scholars have decided, or figured out, the Gospels have been written by particular people to particular people for a particular reason at that time. Now, Matthew seems to be about disputes between people. There's so much in Matthew that's trying to sort out arguments and disputes. And then we have today's parable. And it leads me and other writers to think that it is an answer to a specific question. And the question being, how do two conflicting groups in the same setting, in the same community, in the same family, how do we manage to get along? What do we do when we are just so different from someone else? So if we start briefly at the beginning, He's talking about, sowing seed and weeds come up amongst it as well. I really like the little bit at the beginning, when the first green shoots appeared and the grain began to form, the thistles showed up too. I don't know if this is about, that's a weed over there and that's a piece of wheat over there and that person's weed and that person's wheat. But within ourselves, we are both wheat and weed all the time. And as we go through our life, trying to journey, trying to kind of become more and more human, more and more fully human, which is what divine is about, we learn some stuff, we put it into place, and these beautiful green shoots of new life, of wonderful divinity life, come up. And it's great. However, so do weeds. We don't get this perfectly right, and there are weeds still to be had in all of our lives. And often as a new piece of wheat grows, so too does a weed. Interestingly, Jesus says very clearly, don't go around pulling up all the wheat, getting all the weeds, getting rid of all the weeds everywhere, because you will damage this beautiful new wheat. So when someone is starting out and they're flourishing and their life is growing wheat, good things, don't go around going, oh yeah, but what about that and what about that and look at that over there, oh, look at all these weeds, because you will kill the wheat as well. You will snuff out the good in their life as well, and that's not helpful at all. Jesus says, let the two grow together. I will take care of it at the end. Now, I don't believe most of our Gospels, most of our Bible is literal. They tell of great human stories, great human truths, but I'm not convinced they are literal. Okay, so I do believe that we like to think that Jesus or someone's going to snuff all the wheat out at the end. It makes us feel good. I don't have to take care of it now because God will sort it out at the end. Cool. If that brings you comfort, if you like to think that, then Jesus is saying, hey, don't stress. Let the wheat and the weed grow together. I'll take care of it later. How he takes care of it later might just surprise us all. But either way, we are to leave it to him and let the two things coexist together and to grow together. The other interesting thing is, what is a weed? Sometimes it's something great and genuinely good and useful, maybe just planted in the wrong place. Well, who says it's the wrong place? The dandelions might be considered weeds, but they're also incredibly medicinal. So I think we, in our humanness and in our infancy, can be too quick to judge what's a weed and what's a wheat. What is not of Christ and what is of Christ can be difficult to discern. I believe we are called to live our lives, to live them fully, continually seeking to journey along to becoming more and more human, more and more with the divinity within, more and more like Christ, i.e. loving, forgiving, healing, caring. Leave the judging to God, to Christ, not to you. It's not our job. So that, I believe, is what today's gospel is telling us. We are to stop the finger pointing. We are to stop the devil did it, therefore if the devil did it, I'm right, to go out against it and to be really antagonistic because, the devil did it, which, frankly is a cop-out as well. The devil planted those weeds. the devil made me do it, I'm not sure that is going to get you anywhere. Weeds and wheat will grow together. Don't snuff out the wheat by getting all so worried about the weed. It will work out. It will be taken care of, maybe in surprising ways, but it is not our problem. We are to get along with people. We are to be the Christ so that people can see that way of living. And keep in mind, it's very easy to point fingers as to who's a wheat and who's a weed. Just bear in mind, it might not be how we think. We can be quite weed-like ourselves. So go well into this week, seeking after Christ, seeking to become more and more Christ-like. Don't be snuffing out good wheat just because you think it might be a weed. God bless. I'll see you next week.